The Roaring Twenties. Most people know it as a time of decadence and glamour. But for us, well, times are a bit tougher. You see, running a restaurant isn't easy, especially when you're living in Chinatown. Things got even weirder when the Jiangshi started coming out at night. No one knows why they're haunting us. They just started appearing. And now they're attacking us and our customers. We need to support each other as a family, or our restaurant will fall into decay. Or worse, we'll turn into Jiangshi. Jiangshi, Blood in the Banquet Hall is a tabletop RPG for 3 to 5 players and a game master. The game happens over the course of days that are split up into the daytime phases and nighttime phases. During the daytime, player characters need to finish restaurant chores and take care of customers. At night, Jiangshi, hopping vampires, come out and attack everyone. The game uses a pool of d8s. When a player character rolls, any 4s will cancel out the highest number. The highest die roll after the 4's clear house determines the outcome of the roll. As player characters narrate their story and endure the nightly haunting, they become more stressed, causing them to take damage, have bad dreams, or worse, become Jiangshi. Will you keep your family together in Jiangshi? Blood in the Banquet Hall.
Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of Buyer Fireside Chat here on Global Sources Live. My name is Tom and I will be your host today as we will get to hear the insights of 2 luminaries of the tabletop gaming industry. We're talking about sourcing issues and trends, upcoming market trends in tabletop games. So for all of those of you who are interested in either getting into that market segment or perhaps exploring new options from what you already have, this will be an enlightening and hopefully fascinating discussion. Before we begin, I would like to say that, of course, you must always like and subscribe all of the social media of Global Sources so that you get updates on our upcoming content and events and all that kind of thing. And of course, if you have any comments or questions, you can leave them below this video or to the side, depending on what format you are watching it in. Okay. I was going to do a little bit of spiel about the 2 guests that we have today, but it occurs to me that instead of me talking, I should let them speak for themselves. And so let me just get to my control panel and I'll see if I can bring on our first guest, who is Banana Chan of Game and a Curry. Hey, Banana, how are you doing?
Hey, great. Thank you so much for having me.
No, thank you for joining me. I'm delighted to be able to talk to you. I'm delighted to be able to do an episode about tabletop games, which, as you may know, is a bit of a pet subject of mine. So maybe can you introduce yourself a little bit and maybe talk about your company's background as well, the kind of games you make or publish or sell and so on?
Absolutely. So I own a company, a small company called Game and a Curry, and we started off publishing board games. So we started off publishing small box board games, boxes that were about this big. We just made sure that they were small, they were accessible in terms of price, and they were accessible in terms of carrying things around. And so we wanted to start off with that. And our company sort of evolved into dealing with role-playing games. So now we make larger role-playing games. Currently, our biggest one is Jiangshi Blood in the Banquet Hall, which is it's good for 4 to 5 players. And we're now working on getting our next Kickstarter out. It's been funded, but we're rolling it out to everyone soon, which is Deimos Academy.
All right, very nice. And what's your main kind of distribution market? Where do you sell those products? Are we talking mostly North America or worldwide or what?
Yeah, so currently they're mostly in North America just because things are a little strange. And because we're such a small company, it's harder for us to reach out to a larger audience in terms of shipping. But when it comes to distribution, we do work with distributors. So we work with a few other people. Greater Than Games is one of our partners. We work with them. in terms of shipping. We also work with Wet Ink Games. So with our other game, Junction Blow in the Banquet Hall, it is a co-publishing deal that we have. And so luckily they're in charge of like dealing with the warehousing, dealing with like, all of that. They have someone over at Indie Press Revolution that they talk to. And we're able to like have most of our games warehoused in their Nevada warehouse.
Oh yes, the famous IPR Desert Warehouse. That's right.
Yeah.
The same town as Burning Man, I think, isn't it? All right, fantastic. So I think we know where you're coming from more or less. So let's kind of introduce our second guest as well, and that is from Atlas Games, John Nephew. Hi, John.
Hello, Tom, Brianna. Great to see you guys. Thanks so much for having me.
No, thank you. Thank you for joining us from. You're over in Minnesota, is that right?
Yeah, we're right on the western tip of Lake Superior, in the Duluth area, a suburb, I guess, of Duluth, small town called Proctor, right on the edge of Duluth, and overlooking Lake Superior.
All right, fantastic. Now, I mean, Atlas Games is a storied institution by this point, I would say. Could you, but for those who aren't familiar with it, could you give a bit of an introduction
Sure.
to the company?
My career started as an aspiring writer for Dungeons and Dragons. I began writing for Dragon Magazine as a high schooler, and then used writing and editing for TSR to pay my way through college, and then thought, well, I don't want a real job, so I wound up starting Atlas Games my senior year of college. That was 1990, so it keeps going since then. We began in role-playing games, and then kind of a different path compared to Banana, where we started with RPGs and then diversified into other areas, such as the card games and more recently board games. More recently meaning 15, 20 years. But it has been, I have an interesting perspective, I think, because it goes back to the development of niche board games, particularly as that evolved with Euro games in the 90s, and niche card games and stuff like that, on more of a specialty level. And a lot of that really tracks the story of global trade, because of the ability to source things internationally that used to not be possible in terms of small run board games of 2,000, 3,000, 5,000 copies. Back in the 90s, a printer wouldn't want to talk to you unless you were doing 50,000 or something like that of a board game because of the tooling costs and whatnot. Besides publishing games of our own, we also do warehousing and fulfillment for several other companies, including Kickstarter fulfillment and sales into the hobby distribution channels. So we have here in Proctor, I'm in an old bank building that we own that is our offices, and we lease warehouse space across the street, where we have quite a lot of space in what used to be the Duluth, Mesabi, and Iron Range rail maintenance buildings. So they're these wonderful 100-year-old things for taking apart steam engines. Lots of high vertical space for our pallet racking and stuff like that. So we've been working on being able to deal with an increasing amount of international trade, both with direct shipment and receiving. In fact, when I'm done here, I'm probably going to have to go right over and help unload some floor-loaded accessories, Titan's Terrain, which is arriving today from China as a floor-loaded 40-foot container. So we're going to have a little bit of work taking up all those individual boxes and putting them on pallets and getting them set to fulfill that Kickstarter for those guys at Titan's Terrain.
It's good to see you're still in touch with the working floor, unloading trucks and so on.
Got to do my blood pressure, get a little bit of exercise here and there.
That's very wise, very wise. All right, so let's. I mean, I'm glad you brought up shipping, actually, John, because I think shipping and logistics, sourcing and logistics is very much the bread and butter around here. I think we probably talk about shipping more than any other subject certainly on Global Sources Live, possibly also in the office in general. So I guess the first question is maybe let's talk about the current situation. And I guess the first question maybe then is what are some challenges you've encountered recently in shipping, and even before that, perhaps in production? Or are there any that you see kind of coming in the near future or sticking around in the near future? I'll ask that to Banana first, since John could do with maybe a rest.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we finished, basically when we finished laying out Jiangxia, we had everything ready. And for that specific project, we funded at $100,000 on Kickstarter. And at the time, things weren't as sort of like bonkers as they eventually evolved into. And so we had this impression that like, okay, we're going to be able to pay off like, the shipping, the manufacturing, like everything. At the time, manufacturing, and this was like early, I want to say like early 2021, around like 2021, late 2021. It seems like everything was going to be fine in terms of like manufacturing, and it was like manufacturing. We still like kept up with the quotes that we were quoted by the manufacturer. We used What's Games, and they were brilliant to work with. They were awesome. But when it came to shipping, that's sort of when we saw that there was a bit of an increase. We ended up spending about almost like somewhere between like 30 to 40% of like what we had gotten from the Kickstarter, in terms of like shipping the product from China to the warehouse in the US. And so that was that set us back a lot. And I think like from that experience, we are a little bit nervous in terms of like, what do we do now that, we can't predict like, shipping prices, like what are we going to do now that like we can't predict like manufacturing prices now as well. So I think we're sort of in that area where it's just like, okay, like let's see, let's like hold off and wait and see and like get everything, all of our digital assets ready and just like, see what happens with when it comes to like the physical fulfillment.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, John, I'm guessing you probably had a similar experience last couple of years.
Yeah. So first, I'm going to say that I backed Jiangxia, and it is beautiful. It is just a really fine and exciting piece of work, and you guys knocked it out of the park with that. I was instantly attracted to the Kickstarter, and really delivered on the quality in the end too. That's the kind of stuff we need more of in our field. It's just wonderful. Interestingly, we've had a number of projects at the very same printer and kind of in this very same time frame, so I can really relate to that. What we have found, well, I'll give you a terrible example, painful example. This was actually done at Watts. We had our game called Dice Miner that we had funded on Kickstarter, and it was ready. It was actually ready at the factory on Christmas Eve of 2020. And so we were expecting to probably have it early in the first quarter of 2021. We had something on the order of 8 blank sailings where we were booked on ships for it to get taken across the Pacific, and then those ships got canceled because of the way that blank sailings were happening in the COVID period. And ultimately, when it didn't get to us until June of 2021. So that hurt quite a lot, because we had paid for the printing, and it was literally sitting on the factory floor week after week with new shipments being scheduled and then canceled. And in the end, where our original expectation had been to perhaps on the high end spend $5,000 or $6,000, and on the low end, the best quote I had seen back in like 2019 was for $3,000 for a 40-foot container to the port of Duluth here. We wound up spending $26,000. So that, and I know that that's been the case for a whole lot of other publishers, that it just blew their budgets out of the water. And particularly with crowdfunding, it's a huge challenge because you have to set all these expectations at the beginning in terms of telling people this is what we're going to charge you for shipping, this is what our cost is going to be at. You're collecting the money. You're sort of short selling yourself, or writing a futures contract because you're promising to deliver, and your income is set. But then suddenly costs have become wildly unpredictable. And I would say that that's continuing to be a really big challenge. I'm having to assume that we're still paying $15,000 to $20,000 per shipping container to our door. in this environment. And I hope that will get better, but we have to sort of build our budgets around the assumption that that's just the new normal, and set pricing and expectations accordingly.
Right. I mean, so you kind of have to stake out more or ring fence more of the budget. Does that also apply to time? Are you kind of having to just assume the worst in terms of lead times as well?
Yes. I'm fairly pessimistic about lead times because of all the different elements, including port closures in China, labor issues on the North American West Coast, both in the U.S. and Canada. Wildfires in British Columbia, mudslides in British Columbia. It seems like there's all kinds of new and exciting things. And then also random shipping containers bobbing around in like Puget Sound or whatever. I remember there was that, where there were some overboard shipping containers that were inhibiting shipping around Vancouver at one point. So we try to temper our expectations on delivery times. It's also changing the way that we are looking at upcoming projects. We have a Kickstarter that's going to launch next week called Weird Little Elf. It's a Christmas themed game, party game type thing. We sent it to press a couple months ago, and so we actually had to get all the files going and so forth because it absolutely has to be here by Christmas. And so that means that we can only change the final numbers as a result of the Kickstarter, but we can't make any other changes to it because there's just not time to account for it. And I think increasingly when we take things to crowdfunding, they're going to be essentially press ready or even at the printer, because we have to narrow that scope over which things can change beyond our control. And so altering that timeline to have the maximum flexibility in our planning is really going to be crucial.
For sure. I mean, Bernarda, do you see Game and a Curry kind of starting to plan projects based on kind of similar expectations, or any other changes in future plans?
Yeah, because we're such a small company, like our focus has been on creating digital products. Like we've been pivoting more to like creating digital products, trying to fulfill our things that way. Like we do have our physical book that we have to actually eventually get to manufacturing for Damos Academy, which is something that we were a little concerned about because it does come in a box. It does have like pencils. It does have everything else that comes with it. I think in the future, like we are going to be pivoting. Like if we're going to like make physical books, it would be just books, and trying to stay away from like any other physical components like meeples, dice, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Mostly because like things are so unpredictable.
Sure, like reducing those points of failure kind of thing. Yeah.
Right, exactly.
That makes so much sense. Books have a whole lot of really good things going for them. There's a much wider range of supplies. We've in the last year we wound up printing some books at like a local commercial print shop. Saddle stitched kinds of stuff. 2 local shops for our Magical Kitty Save the Day Kickstarter late last year. We've printed books around the United States, locally, more distant, in Hong Kong. We actually have done a fair amount of printing in Lithuania, especially some color hardcovers. Our upcoming Plagia books are being done in Lithuania. But books are also not immune to today's supply issues. And I'll give you an example. Our Ars Magica medieval fantasy role-playing game, we're sold out of the core rulebook. And it's going on, 18 years or so that this 5th edition has been in print. And we've always printed it at a plant here in Minnesota, which now is a subsidiary of Sheridan Printing. We asked them for a reprint quote, and they said, we can't get the paper. It has been the absolute, totally standard 50-pound offset paper that we've used for decades in this book. And they just said, the entire supply that they could get their hands on is already reserved, even though that has been sort of like the default most common type of paper. And we were looking at, here are substitutes, but when you do things like substitutes, then suddenly the spine width is different and the dimensions are different and the weight is different. It results in all these things where like, oh, and we have to go back and literally this book was laid out in Quark Express 3. So there are unexpected things, but at least you have a lot more options and choices, I think, when it comes to the book format because of the diversity of suppliers and alternatives. And that's not even considering things like having media mail as a less expensive shipping option in the United States, and a lot of countries that either have lower or zero rating on VAT for book imports, which makes a huge difference selling to places like the UK or other places in Europe where the issues of cross-border trade have gotten post-Brexit and post-EU rule changes have become a lot more complicated.
That's for sure. But let's, speaking of supply chains and options, I actually do want to ask you about a slightly, less nitty-gritty but equally important topic, which is what kind of just to do with the ethical dimension of the supply chain. It's kind of increasingly important. Well, I guess morally it was always equally important, but it's increasingly important to consumers that you have a supply chain that is, ethical and sustainable, whether that's in terms of, adequate compensation for the workers who are producing these things back in the factory or even further up the chain. And of course, the questions of packaging and environmental damage during production or shipping. What do you and your companies do to ensure that you are, scoring as high marks as you can on those fronts? Banana, could we go to you first?
Yeah, so we've been working with What's Games for a while. I want to say about like 5 or 6 years, and they've been pretty good partners in terms of like making sure that everything is transparent, making sure that they have when they're talking about like the materials that they use or like the that kind of thing, like we know what is going into our games, and so that's sort of like one of the reasons why we went with them is because the quality is great, and also the materials have been good and everything is like CE tested and all of that stuff. Like they do all that for you. And so that's one of the reasons why we went with them. I would say that in terms of like making sure that everyone gets paid equally and fairly, like we do, set industry standards in terms of like when it comes to paying our designers or paying like our writers, that kind of thing. I think like in terms of like actually getting things made, it's a little trickier right now. Like it's harder to say just because it's just like, we're not actually getting anything made right now. Like we're at a standstill. So it's a harder question to answer, I think.
Fair enough. John, how about for Atlas? I know that actually there's always been a bit of a sustainability drive going on over there, I think.
Yeah, it's something we've put a growing amount of interest in recent years. One thing is that we, in our request for quotes process when we're looking for suppliers, one thing that we look for, particularly in the Chinese manufacturers, is there's something called the Ethical Toy Program from the ICTI. And so this is a certification process that factories and suppliers can go through. And Watts, for example, that we both use, is a company that does have that certification. So that gives us confidence in terms of them having to comply with some independently verified ethical standards for sourcing and labor practices and things like that. I overall, I feel like a number of things on the world stage are not only making us think about the ethics of sourcing, but also think about the complications of the geopolitical and human rights context. We've been impacted by the Russia-Ukraine war. We have some artists and we have licensees in the Russian Federation. It makes it harder to be able to work with them due to trade restrictions and so forth. Generally, I've been, in touch with these people who have been saying we're really upset with what's happening. One licensee said we're thinking about moving our business to Kazakhstan because we're not sure that it's going to be viable to stay in Russia with the kind of global reaction to this. And so much board game production is done in China that I have concerns as we see whether issues of the Uyghurs in Western China, or crackdowns on democracy and freedoms in Hong Kong, or saber rattling toward Taiwan. Besides being concerned about those things from an ethical standpoint, just in terms of cold business calculation, we have to consider what does it do to our business if there are trade disruptions on a regional basis in East Asia because of some of these factors that could go somewhere scary. And so those are all the Russian major invasion of Ukraine, I think, is a wake-up call to remind us all that the world order isn't necessarily we're not immune to what was happening in the 20th century as far as what can happen in the 21st, and we have to diversify our supply chains and our alternatives so that we don't get blindsided and closed down by force majeure events all over the place.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, we're seeing, it's a very big trend that we're seeing in pretty much every product category of just diversifying the supply chains, or at least having reserve suppliers as well, and whether that be between actual like different countries and continents where your suppliers are from, or even even kind of changing the kinds of components that you're using to make sure that, I mean, so when there's a shortage of one thing, the price of that doesn't affect your product potentially too much. It's, yeah, as you say, it's something of a minefield. Sorry, Bernarda, did you want to add something?
No, I think, John, you hit on like all the major points, which definitely makes things a little trickier to make things in this day and age.
The sustainability topic too is one that we've given a lot of thought to, and we were making we're very concerned about plastics, and they are both a miraculous material that can do all sorts of wonderful things, and they're also such a nightmare environmentally in terms of their non-degradability. Is that a word?
It is now.
They don't degrade, and of course the virgin stock coming from fossil fuels and the carbon impact and that kind of stuff. So we've been giving a lot of thought to how we can be better, more responsible producers in terms of plastics, and especially single-use plastics. So we have shifted as much as possible. We're discontinuing shrink wrapping a whole lot of games. We are going to using little removable clear plastic tabs to hold boxes closed instead of having the entire thing shrink wrapped. And that's changing our thought about the design and the components and the materials, because shrink wrap is very good for protecting a lot of fancy, matte or spot varnish finishes and stuff like that. And if it's not shrink wrapped, you have to be more concerned about how much it may get scratched in transit. We were recently fulfilling a book for another publisher, the Tales of Zadia role-playing game, which was beautifully produced at a book printer in Texas, and it has a wonderful treatment on the cover. This is the Dragon Prince role-playing game. But for all of their Kickstarter, I guess they didn't Kickstarter, they did a lot of pre-orders. They had a huge number of pre-orders going out to individual consumers. We wound up buying tissue paper and individually wrapping the books in tissue paper inside a cardboard mailer to make sure that beautiful finish wouldn't just get scratched up just by boxes shifting around in trucks as they went across the country and around the globe. So sustainability in that sense, I think, is a key thing that we can all think about. And I think that we as publishers need to sort of take the lead in setting consumer expectations, in not having it, okay, this isn't shrink wrapped. That should not mean this is defective, but it should mean like, oh, look, they're paying attention to this. And some of it is we need to train people to think of things maybe as being actually it's actually not cheaper to not shrink wrap it, because shrink wrapping is very automated. You have to have somebody put those tabs on it. So it actually costs more not to shrink wrap it. But it means that you don't have a sheet of plastic getting tossed into the world's waterways the minute the box gets taken home and opened up to be played with.
Yeah, very true. Very true.
Yeah, I think that we're trying to make things like also focusing on the idea of reusability as well. And so like making sure that, I mean, legacy games are really cool, but at the same time, if you're ripping up a card, then it's like, okay, you've gotten rid of that card. So thinking about like, can we have some digital assets that are put online? Can we like, ask folks to, instead of, having everything right there in front of them, maybe having some of these things like online they can use on their iPad, or they can play around with their, play around with things like digitally versus like actually having it in front of them. So that's something that we've been thinking about. And also just like, switching over to like dry erase markers, or like, making sure that things that like character sheets and things like that, like you could just like use a dry erase marker over a character sheet like over and over again. Excuse me, sorry. I'm still recovering from COVID, so I'm just like trying.
No. It's totally understandable. I'm glad you brought up this the topic of kind of new ideas and new sort of formats and ways of delivering your game. I'm going to say the word content, game content, because I also do want to ask you guys about the hopefully slightly more fun, less doom and gloom topic of market trends that you guys see coming up. What do you see as being some major major kind of movements in the coming year in 2023 for tabletop or family or party games, maybe kind of just things that are new, or maybe not, even if they're not going to be big trends yet? Do you see any interesting developments that you think will pick up some steam? John, let's start with you there.
Put me on the spot here. Well,
sorry.
In terms of no, that's fine. I think that we're going to continue to see some supply uncertainties, and I think a lot of this is a good time to figure out what's available and how to market that in a lot of ways. For example, our game Magical Kitties Save the Day is a boxed introductory role-playing game, very family-friendly. And I was just running the numbers yesterday on it and realized that we had just reprinted it and received it like in December. And we were halfway through the print run, and at the rate of sales, we're probably not going to last through Christmas. And so I'd love to push this, but honestly, if sales double, I don't know that we can have it back because of the time to get it manufactured and delivered and so forth. We actually need now to start placing an order to hope to have it in time for Christmas. And certainly we would not be able to deal with a really big jump in the sales. Our other big recent game has been Dice Miner. This is one where we have actually already ordered the reprint, even though the most recent printing arrived in March or April. But we looked at the rate of sales and said, oh, hey, if we want to have this for Christmas, we've got to place an order now and hope that we're right. And we're really caught right now because the shipping costs are so outrageous that there's a real sense of, well, how deep do we want to go, given that we have these enormous expenses right now? Our best-selling game is Gloom, which is a transparent card game. And so it's printed on transparent plastic. For years, we printed it in the United States. But what we found last year when we were needing to order a reprint was that because the material is sourced globally, that the cost of printing in the United States had gone up like 300%. And so we wound up shifting production from the US to Taiwan, because even with the shipping cost, it was going to be considerably cheaper doing it in Taiwan. But that's a game where normally I would plan to order about 60,000 copies and plan to have it supplied for easily 3 years. But just knowing what the shipping cost was, we trimmed it down to a third of that size of print run, because my calculation is that it's probably going to cost so much less in shipping a year from now or 2 years from now that it's better for us not to print more and risk running out sooner in order to not overcommit in the inflated shipping market of today. And also to give us more options for more nearby sourcing. So I think a lot of, in terms of, if I'm a buyer of games, it's a good time to diversify and maybe look at things that are available closer by while you have to get them. And maybe there are undiscovered gems. I mean, if Kate Bush can make it back on the charts after 37 years, there probably are some hidden new wave games that are actually waiting out there to be rediscovered that a lot of people never saw the first time around.
Yeah, quite possibly. I mean, Banana, for you, what's on your radar, and what do you think that maybe buyers should be looking at, preparing for now to, order, so they'll have it arriving in 2023. Frankly, I think we're looking at long-term planning by this stage.
I think like last year we were seeing the rise of solo games. So like a lot of folks were buying solo games. That was like the big thing right now, just because like, everyone is isolated, quarantined. Hence why, the surge in solo games. I think now we're starting to see a lot of people get back together again. And so because of that, like party games are making a comeback, like tabletop games, like role-playing games specifically, those are making a comeback just because like everyone wants to get together again. They want to like, have their game nights. They want to have their, little events that are happening in flagship stores and stuff. But maybe I'm being skeptical and like pessimistic, but I think that solo games are probably going to come back sometime soon. So I would say like 2023, like definitely keeping an eye out for solo games or 2-player games or games that don't require a lot of players. Like I think that's sort of where things are headed.
Fair enough. I always think that's an underserved market. Anyway, the board game that actually works with 2 players is something my wife and I are constantly on the hunt for, and very rarely find, I must say. Sorry, John, I think you were going to say something.
We have a game called Hounded that is an asymmetrical 2-player game, and I think we printed it at Watts also. And it has been a continuing good seller for us, I think, precisely because people are like, oh, we need a 2-player game. We want something that couples can play. And I know a lot of stores have told us that's a go-to thing when someone comes in and says, I'm looking for a game for 2 players. Well, this is only 2 players, so it's good for that. Yeah. And I think, Banana, you have a great point about solo rules. We've seen people looking for solo rules for games that may not have been originally envisioned that way. And I think that has been growing in popularity. And it's something that we are starting more to think about of, hey, can there be a variant for playing this solo? Because that's something that people are looking for. There's a lot of great online play options. And people are growing into that, but I think people still love the tactile feel of rolling dice and having boards and figures and cards and terrain and stuff you can put your hands on.
Yeah, for sure. All right, let me round this off with one last question for you both. And I suspect the answer might just be no, it's too late. But right now, I think this is, if you're not already ordering for Christmas, the sands of time are running through the metaphorical hourglass very quickly. So do you think if someone's going to make a last-minute order to hit the holiday season, is there any particular kind of game or kind of gaming product, maybe an accessory, something like that they should look at to be maybe the stocking filler or the add-on item in their catalog? Banana?
Actually, I think that I just realized something. I think that books are also like a big seller right now as well. So definitely like looking at supplements and like a lot of the times I think that like people who play Pathfinder or D&D, they don't necessarily like actually play it. They just like to read the books or like to have the books. So I think that having those like having supplements, selling I think like supplements or like, core books or anything like that. Like, I think that's always going to be a good seller.
I'm going to also say that I feel like the game market has matured and diversified, and there's a lot more. It's amazing to me how many people are into games, into the popularity of Dungeons and Dragons, and the diversity of games that are out there. It's remarkable. I think a lot of if you're a retailer carrying this stuff, it can be hard to predict what is your local market going to be into. Besides the very top games, are they going to want to play Jiangxi? Are they going to want to play Unknown Armies from us or something like that? And so you need to listen to your local audience, and then also look for things that are add-ons that work for a lot of different games. Dice, accessories for carrying your dice. Gamers can have no end of dice. And also think about that there are more people that are into games that have disposable income and that are willing. I'm continually surprised with Kickstarters at how there are people that will spend a ludicrous amount of money on really exclusive stuff.
Yeah.
And I think when you look for some of those kinds of things, and a lot of them are made kind of on an artisanal basis, the game tables that are custom built, or places like Wormwood's dice trays made of fancy hardwoods and stuff like that. But getting some of those things they're going to be eye candy and Christmas gifts that somebody who doesn't necessarily know what particular role-playing game somebody on their gift list wants to get. They're probably going to love getting dice made out of semi-precious gemstones. They're going to love getting accessories that they can, dice towers, dice holders, things to be able to keep their cards sleeved, stuff like that. And those are not going to be, if you can get them, they're not going to be as limited by what happens to be locally popular or what happens to be available or not in terms of other trends, including, the biggest name games. Those are all things that are useful for them. So that would be something. The other thing I would say is when it comes to ordering, speaking for us, and I think this is probably the same for you, Diana, we keep the inventory on the US side and the North American side. So at some point we may sell out before Christmas, but we will absolutely be shipping orders to stores over the course of the next 6 months for holiday sales, as long as we have them in stock. If we sell out of them, there's not going to be time for us to get more of them, but we do warehouse them here, and so it's not the same as needing to buy from a factory. If a store goes on onto our website as a retailer and places an order, we're going to have it shipped within a couple of days, and that will remain the case up through November, December. But yeah, if there's a run on something, it's going to be gone. And this is one of the areas where I think the hobby game market differs from the mass market, in that a lot of the mass market retailers and toy stores have a tradition of where they place orders at Toy Fair in February for stuff that's going to arrive in time for Christmas, and that's the bulk of their purchasing for the entire year. And in the specialty games that we do, both of our companies, we tend to have a much more year-round audience, and our business is more built around that. It's less seasonally driven on availability and so forth. So I think that actually can be a big advantage for people who are sourcing things and may have thought, hey, we missed out because we didn't place our advance order in February, which allowed the company to place its order at the factory in February for delivery in August, and then delivery to us in October for Christmas sales. Our smaller companies are more nimble, and we don't function that way, in the way that I think a lot of traditional large toy and game companies did for decades.
Can I tag on one more thing?
Yeah. Go ahead.
I think if folks are looking for trends in general, Board Game Geek, bgg.com. That's a good place to like look for what everyone's interested in through the hotness. Obviously, like BGG isn't like the be all say all, like, you know, area of where you should find like all of your games. Social media is also a great way to like see what everyone's interested in and like talking about and following like specific accounts that that promote specific games.
Absolutely, yeah, very good tip. Yeah.
Another thing on that, look at Kickstarter.
Mm-hmm.
More and more of these games come on Kickstarter first. I would say that our experience is that a game that has a successful launch at Kickstarter sells considerably more copies after the Kickstarter, both in direct sales and sales through the retail and wholesale channels. And so something that has proven itself with the demand on Kickstarter, that does not mean that that demand has been satisfied. It means that you've got a product there that there's probably untapped demand because there are people that missed it while it was there. So retail stores should absolutely troll Kickstarter for what are the projects that are coming out that are fulfilling now and that have additional copies made available for selling into the channels, because there will be people looking for those games because they missed out on it when it was offered, which may have been 2 years ago.
Right. Yeah. Great tip. All right. Final question, I promise, and that is where can people find your companies online, and which of your games should they be excited about? Banana, please deliver your sales pitch first.
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks for having me. You can find my company, Game and a Curry, at Game and a Curry on Twitter and Facebook, and you can find our website, www.gameandacurry.com.
Very nice. John, for Atlas Games?
Yeah, our website is atlas-games.com, or it's just a dash in the middle there. And I'd say for games for the upcoming holiday season that I would plug, Magical Kitties Save the Day is a great introductory role-playing game. And we have both a deluxe version and a standard version that's very accessible for new folks. We're live. I'm going to grab from across the room because I actually have
to be my guest.
I realized I forgot to mention our games.
Yeah, you sort of did. I was going to come back and say, do you want to repulse to any? But let's let John grab his first.
So the deluxe version has an oversleeve, but this is the basic version with some wonderful artwork by.
Let me just solo you there to make it
a Russian artist. So your magical kitties, you have humans, you have magic powers, you have to save them and protect them. So that's a great all ages role-playing game. Another game that is really good for us is Dice Miner. This one has proven extremely popular. So this has a whole lot of custom dice. It's a dice drafting game. It also has solo rules. And so this one, we're in our second printing right now and have ordered a third printing. We're also going to be doing some experimenting on doing some custom dice mountains for the game part of the game piece of this, using recycled plastic here in Minnesota. We're going to try to repurpose some of our local waste stream and make optional accessories for this game. And we're also going to be looking at other games that we can do that for. And the third one that I'm going to pitch is Weird Little Elf, which is a Christmas-themed party game, which will be out in time for the holidays this season. It's going to be it's like a little $13 box of cards, and that's going to be coming to Kickstarter soon. And then we'll have it going to stores, and it's designed to be a stocking stuffer. It's a small point of purchase sale kind of thing to have at the countertop at your point of sale for impulse buys in the holiday season. We're hoping. So
yeah, fingers crossed.
My
do you want to go to your
I'll be right back.
Okay.
You're grabbing. She was supposed to be while I was yapping.
Well, I don't want to criticize, but she could have been doing that while. No, I think she was. I think Banana wanted to see them just as much as everyone else. So,
while she's nabbing her games, the plastic recycling is a whole different topic. But we're going to do some a bunch of things. Was thinking about sustainability and supply chains and shipping costs and all of these climate change and whatnot has led us to be thinking about how to take waste plastic and turn it into a resource. And so we are in fact applying for a permit for a property that we're going to be buying here just down the street to create a workshop for developing products using local waste material, making it into new products, particularly plastics and stuff like that. So we will have more stuff coming down the pike as that experiment proceeds. There are some very exciting things for local plastics recycling and repurposing that are available nowadays. So
that sounds laudable and fascinating, but also quite difficult. I mean, how do you even begin doing that?
A great place to go is Precious Plastics is an outfit in the Netherlands that designs open source machines for small scale, local focused plastic recycling. And there are a number of kinds of plastic like high density polyethylene and polypropylene that are widely used and quite easily and safely recyclable. And so what they've done is they've designed a lot of machines out of off the shelf parts and released under open source plans for making these machines for things like grinding up old milk bottles or containers, and then extruding them and using them to make everything from outdoor furniture to things that you can injection mold or extrude or stuff like that. So it's actually a pretty remarkable range of things that are available. And now the goodies. Let's see what she's talking
okay. So banana, you just missed some. It's all right. You missed a bit of plastic chat, but you can catch it on the replay.
Oh, okay, awesome.
I'll bend you here with that another time.
Yeah. I had to put on a mask and run out and get all the games.
Okay, let's go on.
So we have 3 games. Lair is our worker placement game. All of our board games, they come in like a small box. So this is what I was talking about when it comes to accessibility. Sorry, I'm just a little out of breath from running downstairs. But we try to make everything accessible for our audience. So this is a worker placement game where you're playing a super villain trying to make a secret super underground lair.
Do you do product trades with other companies?
Sorry?
Do you do product trades with other companies? I just realized I
do.
Yeah.
I would love to trade with you.
Let's do this after the stream.
Absolutely. And this is by Tam. Our second game is Battle of the Boy Bands, and Battle of the Boy Bands is by Yunsu Kim and Vicky Ho. It is basically, again, another small box game where you are a music producer trying to build the best boy band, and you get to sabotage other people's boy bands. And it's mostly cards. The cards on the artwork is amazing because it's just like a bunch of boy bands. And finally, we have Junction 1, the Banquet Hall, which is a game that I co-designed with my design partner, Sanfon Lim. This is a role-playing game, so that's why it's in the bigger box. But it comes with 2 books, 1 scenario book, 1 core book, and basically it's about a Chinese-American family running a restaurant in the 1920s. And in the daytime, you're trying to manage this restaurant, and at night, the hopping vampires come out and attack everyone. So those are the pitches for our games.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Thanks to both of you for your time and your fascinating insights and your cool games that you talked about. And I'm sure the viewers will have gleaned a lot of good examples and tips and tricks and best practices and dire warnings as well, to be honest. So thank you very much for that. Speaking of those viewers, thank you viewers for watching. Do click the links below this video to go and visit Game & Curry and Atlas Games, or have memorized the things they said earlier. And we will catch you next time on Global Sources Live. But until then, thank you very much and goodbye.